Tuning into the LinkedIn. Today we are talking about our favorite subject matter, how to book more speeches. And I'm joined by my good friend, Grant Baldwin. Welcome, Grant.
Jane, it is always a delight to hang out with you. I appreciate you letting me be here.
We have fun, don't we?
Yes, we
Now
do.
tell everybody, if they don't know who Grant Baldwin is in the Speaker Lab, tell them all about your business.
Yeah, so if we go way back in time, I was a full-time speaker for several years and got to a point where I was doing about 60, 70 gigs a year and learned a lot from you many years ago. And so I got to a point where I was just like, speaking is fun, but I knew I didn't want to travel anymore. I knew I didn't necessarily want to switch industries and kind of bounce around a little bit. And so at the time, I had a lot of people who were asking me like, "Hey, I want to be a speaker. How do I go about doing that?"
Yeah.
And so we started doing some teaching and coaching around that, and that's has done well. And so run a training company called the Speaker Lab, where we teach people how to find and book gigs. And so, Jane, you are a can I say like the matriarch of the speaking industry? Is that
That
that's
makes
a
me feel like the Queen of England. I'm not sure
that,
I want to feel that old.
yeah, no, it's not. That's why I was trying to be cautious here. You've been at it for a long time. You have a ton of longevity in the industry and extremely well respected. And so I have a ton of admiration for you. And yeah, so we both, I know a lot of people, there's always no shortage of people who want to know how to find and book gigs. And so lots of people we can help.
Oh, beautiful. Well, I'm so glad that you're here today. And hey, if you're tuning in from LinkedIn or YouTube or Facebook, let us know. We've got the chat box open, it's warmed up, it's ready to roll. We would love to hear from you. Now, today's conversation about how to book more speeches, let's start with what we both think is kind of like the number one thing to be thinking about if you're going to get booked as a speaker. What would be some of your key ideas for getting booked for more speeches?
Yeah, we teach a 5-step framework that we call the Speaker Success Roadmap. It makes the acronym SPEAK, SPEAK. So the
All
first
right.
step of the process, S, is select a problem to solve. And so
Mm,
this is the most foundational, most important part. And I think we probably agree on this that there's two sides of the equation. There's who do you speak to and what's the problem that you solve for that audience. And
mhm.
the tendency for most speakers, especially early on, is we want to spread the net as far and wide as possible. So when we ask like who do you speak to, it's like I speak to humans, I speak to people. My message is for everybody, right? And when we talk about like what do you speak about, what problem do you solve, the answer is a lot of times like, well, what do you want me to speak about? I can speak about anything. I can speak about leadership or family or marriage or health or fitness. Or it's just like, even if you're interested in all those things or you're passionate about all those things, even if you know a little bit about all those things, you do not want to try to be a speaker or an expert on all of those things because it's just not believable. So we
So,
talk about the difference between being a steakhouse and a steakhouse versus a buffet, meaning like if we were going to lunch, we were looking for a good steak, like we have a choice. We could go to a buffet where steak is one of 100 different things that they offer and they're all mediocre, or we could go to a steakhouse where they do one thing, but they do that one thing really, really, really well, right? So
that's
they don't do pizza, lasagna, tacos, like they do steak, and that is it. Okay. Let me give you one other analogy. So literally we were talking about this before we went live. This is a like live current event here. So a couple days ago my wife had a kidney stone,
mm,
and which is incredibly painful from what I've been told. And so she ended up, I had to take her to the ER a couple days ago, and ended up having to have surgery, right? So the surgeon who does this, the urologist who does this, like day in and day out, they deal with kidney stones, right? Now I could go find any medical doctor. It's like, you're a doctor, you went to medical school, you probably know more about the human body than I do. You know more, you know something about a kidney stone, right? But if you've never done surgery on a kidney stone, like I don't want you cutting open my wife. But if you're someone like day in and day out, like this is what they do, then it's a lot easier for to say, okay, you're exactly what we're looking for. And again, it's counterintuitive because as speakers, we think, but I want to be a urologist and a brain surgeon and a heart surgeon and whatever, like no, you don't want to do that. You want to solve one specific problem for one specific audience. And again, it's counterintuitive, but the more you do that, the easier it is to find and book gigs.
I love that. Your S is kind of like our pick a lane idea.
Mm-hmm.
So Elaine Fraze is coming in. Hi from the farm. Curious how to expand in agricultural associations. And we're going to get to that. I help find harmony through understanding for farm families in transition. Elaine has picked a lane, agricultural families, helping them have those difficult conversations about legacy and transitioning the farm and that type of thing is huge. And she has gone incredibly deep and narrow in her lane, and that has paid off in spades. And so, picking a lane is definitely number one on the list if you want to get booked more speeches. I just interviewed Shola Richards. I have another client named Shola as well. Shola Richards for the podcast, and he talks about kindness in the workplace. And he actually attributed it back to reading the book, which was a lovely compliment. He said, had I not picked that lane, I never would have gotten called into Congress to testify and talk about kindness in the workplace.
Right.
He would never have been known for this one thing. And so that's our goal, is to be the person, the go-to person in that one space. I'm loving this conversation. What does the P in speak stand for?
Yeah, the P is to prepare your talk. So once you're clear on this is who I speak to, this is the solution that I provide to that audience, then we've got to
Mhm.
figure out like what is that solution? How does that turn into a talk? And even kind of like piggybacking on Elaine's comment there, it's important to that just because you figure like, okay, I've narrowed down what I want to talk about and who I want to speak to. There's some overlap there between what you're interested in, what you're passionate about, and what is it that organizations and groups actually hire speakers for, and what is it that they pay speakers for? Now, what you don't want to do is you don't want to kind of like bounce around and just figure out, hey, where's the money or where's the most opportunities, and I'm going to
Mhm.
go do that. Like, I don't think either of us would ever recommend or advise that. But you
No.
absolutely want to make sure that there's opportunities that exist there, especially if you're wanting to be a paid speaker, because there may be opportunities, but maybe it's an industry or a topic that they're just not used to hiring or paying speakers for, or maybe there's just not a ton of opportunities. Like if you say, hey, I'm the world's foremost expert on underwater basket weaving,
Mhm.
that's great. But if nobody's hiring speakers to talk about that, then there's no opportunities for you to really speak on that topic. So again,
Right.
just something to be aware of and consider. So P, prepare your talk. This is where, again, you put together the presentation, you put together the keynote or the workshop or the breakout, however the format is that you're going to be presenting that material. But here we dig into, storytelling and using humor and intros and outros, transitions, being really, really clear on, again, how you're going to provide that solution to that audience and what's the best way to go about doing that.
Love that. And what we say over here, Grant and I have similar business models, but at the same time, we say everything just a little bit differently than each other. And I
Sure.
love that it's all kind of pointing you in the right direction. It's all going down the same path. And so I've always said that there's no better form of marketing than a great speech. So
Mm-hmm.
spend a lot of time and energy and money on getting good, because that will carry you through your business. So if you want to book more speeches, take a look at the speech and make sure that it's as good as it can possibly be. Now, Alan is saying, but you can't pick a lane unless you know who your following is.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking he means unless you know who your people are. So some people might go out into the world with a message, and they might speak to lots and lots of different audiences with this message. Let's go back to Shola's example, kindness in the workplace. um, who's his following? It's going to be corporate, it's going to be associations. There's going to be a lot of applications for that
Right.
particular message. So I would say it's nice to know when you go like deep into an audience. Let's say Shola decided that he was going to go deep into healthcare and
Mm-hmm.
just do kindness in the workplace for healthcare. That would be niched down even further. And I love when people are that brave. What do you
Right.
think about the niche versus the lane? So when we talk about lane, we're kind of talking about it in terms of topic.
Yeah, yeah. So for most speakers, whenever it comes to those two different sides of the equation of who do you speak to and what's the problem that you solve,
Mhm.
oftentimes we're clear on one and fuzzy on the other. I know I want to speak on this topic. I don't know who I'd speak to. I know I want to speak to this group. I don't know what they'd hired me for. And so
Okay.
most of the time that tends to be the case. And so it sounds like for Alan, maybe he's clear on on what he wants to speak about, but I'm not sure who I would speak to. So a
Mhm.
lot of times I try to look at and try to zoom out and figure out like, what's your experience? What's your background? Where are your connections? Right. So I'll give you an
Yeah.
example. There was there's a speaker we were working with, and they were wanting to speak to what was it? It was, I don't remember the group that they were wanting to speak to, but I was asking about like, what's your background, what's your industry, kind of what's your experience, just like
Right.
talk to me about where you've been. And they've been in real estate their entire career. I was like, let's start there. Like, let's start with some like low hanging fruit because you already understand like, and they attended a lot of conferences in that space. They had been on committees and boards,
Yeah.
and they knew who the players were, they knew who the people were, they knew who the inside, like they knew the insider baseball lingo that
Yeah.
audience used, right? So it's like, let's start with something you already know that you already have some connections with versus going like, hey, there's some opportunity. Like if I said, I want to go speak to attorneys, but I don't know anything about being an attorney or what it's
Right.
like, or I don't know any of that stuff, right? So you're literally starting from scratch versus I have some contacts or connections or experience or relationships over here. Let's start there. Because one of the things we're trying to do is we're trying to pick a starting point. Now,
Mhm.
most speakers have a difficult time with this because we think like, if once I nail down like who I speak to, what I speak at, what that lane is, I feel like that's a permanent lane, and it's not. Like we're picking a starting point where
Right.
for most speakers, you're picking a lane, and then at some point you can put your blinker on and change lanes. That's okay. And there's a lot of speakers that do that and reinvent themselves over their careers. So don't feel like you're making a permanent decision here. You're not getting a tattoo. You're getting a starting point that gets the ball rolling.
And sometimes when we start doing our outbound efforts to get booked more, to book more speeches, we say, okay, I'm just going to focus on real estate. And that's where you go out to real estate.
Right.
But you may get a call from an insurance association or a
Yep.
bank or somewhere else. And that is okay. When we get really focused on our outbound, doesn't mean that we're blocking anything inbound. We take and accept everything coming inbound. Okay, so we've got SPEAK. S is for select, P is for prepare. What's the E for?
E is to establish yourself as the expert. Establish yourself as the expert. So here we're talking about like marketing tools. What are the marketing tools? Because just because like, okay, I'm clear on who I speak to, I'm clear on what the problem is that I solve and how I solve that in terms of my presentation, my speech. The E is your marketing materials where you're able to like get the word out of this is who you are and this is what you do. So two key marketing tools every speaker needs is you need a website and you need a demo video. You need a website and a demo video. If you don't have a website, people won't take you seriously, right? You got to have a website, and it doesn't have to be any fancy, doesn't have to have a ton of bells and whistles, like literally just a simple one-page site. And there's a ton of great free or inexpensive tools available today that weren't
Mm-hmm.
available 5, 10, 20 years ago, where you can get like a sharp looking website up and running quickly. So having a website, and then the second thing is having that demo video. Now, this is something that can be intimidating for a lot of different speakers, but it really doesn't need to be. Okay. So think of your demo video kind of like a movie trailer. Before you would go see a movie, they're going to take a 90-minute, a 2-hour movie. They're going to boil it down to 2 or 3 minutes. And within
Right.
those 2 or 3 minutes, you have an idea of who's in it, what's the plot, what's the theme, what's kind of the main idea. And even like for a 2-3 minute trailer, like you don't even need to see that much. Like for most people, they see like 10 seconds and immediately like, okay, I'm hooked. I need to see more. Or
Mhm.
just like, this is dumb. I
Yeah,
ain't going to
yeah,
watch that. Right. Because an event planner, like if they're looking at 3, 4, 5 different speakers, they're not going to watch a whole bunch of hour-long talks. They don't need to see that much to determine whether or not you are a fit for their event. They really just need to see a couple of minutes. So you want to put together a tight reel there of what your presentation is about, and it gives them a sense of how you present, because they're watching it through the lens of not only is this person good with this person, what do they talk about, but also is this person a fit for my event. So the other thing I would remind you of is when you're working on your website and your demo video, you're creating version 1.0. So do it with excellence, do it with the best of your ability, but also recognize again, it's not permanent. So at this
just
point
beginning.
in my own career, like I've had, I don't know, 6 or 7 different demo videos over the years, and you go back to the first one, you're like, that's horrible, right? But then you get some better footage, the talk
You
gets
see the
better
cringy.
audience. Very, very, very. And each time it gets a little bit
Yeah.
better, right? So work with what you've got, do it to the best of your ability, do it with excellence, and improve as you go.
And let me just give you one little tip about demo videos is a lot of people tend to miss the stories. They have lots and lots of teaching on the video because, well, that's my message. I need to get my message out. But put in a little section of story. You telling a story is really important. And don't be afraid to put your best stuff on
Right.
the demo. So we were afraid. I remember way back when I represented Vince Pacenti, he was an Olympic athlete who got up on
Mhm.
a chair and did this crazy demonstration of
Mhm.
what the Olympic sport of speed skiing looked like, 150 degree, 150 miles an hour on skis going downhill. And we were afraid to put it up front for fear of maybe scaring somebody off or something. But
Mhm.
that turned out to be his differentiator. And the minute we
Right.
put it in there, everything changed. It was a big explosion. So that was cool. Okay, we're documenting these. We've got select, prepare, establish. What is the A for?
The A is acquire paid speaking gigs. Now, this is the part that we want to fast forward to, that we want to get to. Like, Grant, Jane, just tell me, how do I book gigs, right? But
Yeah.
again, like we have to have these foundational pieces in place first. So if you said, just tell us how to book gigs, like, okay, well, what do you speak about? Who do you speak to? I'll speak about whatever. Just tell me how to book gigs. Okay, what you're talking about? I don't know. I'll figure it out. But tell me how to
Right.
book gigs. Like, you got to have these things in place. Now, again, once you have the website, once you have the demo video, like, nobody cares. Like, your mom is thrilled. She's going to tell both of her friends. Nobody else cares. So just because you build it, just because you put it online, doesn't mean that all of a sudden, like, all right, when are the gigs going to start flowing in? Like, it just doesn't work like that. So at this point, you'd have to be a bit more proactive to get the ball rolling. And
Yeah.
speaking, as Jane, you well know, like, speaking is very much a momentum business, and
Yes.
gigs lead to more gigs. And so
Yes.
to get the momentum going, you can't, again, just sit back and wait. So there's kind of two approaches here. You can kind of go the passive or the proactive way. And the passive way is kind of like, I'm going to like passively mention on Twitter, I'm a speaker. I'm going to maybe put up a YouTube video. Maybe I'll mention on a podcast. And we just kind of like, okay, I put it out in the world and now I just sit back and wait. And like, again, that doesn't work. The proactive approach is to go out to find the right type of events that are a good fit for you and begin to start some of those conversations about why you would be a fit and why and how you could help them, how you could help provide a solution to what they're looking for in a speaker.
And we think about it like you're looking at a blank farmer's field. Elaine, you'll like this reference. And you just begin seed planting, 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 planting. You do need to go back and fertilize, not with
Mm-hmm.
BS, but with like good quality content, and give it some water and ensure that you're building the relationship. Just know that one seed that you plant tomorrow, it might not sprout up for a couple of years, but
Right.
it's amazing what can happen with consistency. And so I love that acquire as being our next step. What does the K stand for?
The K, yeah, that's beautiful singing there. I love that. The K is know when to scale, meaning that a lot of people who are interested in speaking are also interested in writing a book or doing coaching or doing consulting or doing a podcast or doing a YouTube channel or doing a course. And so we always tell speakers, you can do all the things, but you
Mhm.
can't do all the things at once. Something's going to
Mhm.
come first, something's going to come last. You have to be really, really clear about how speaking fits into the mix, meaning that there are some speakers that say, I want to do 50 gigs a year and nothing else, right? And some that are like, I don't want to do that many. I would love to do 5 gigs a year. And I also want to write a book. And I also want to do some of these other things. So just understand and be clear for you. It's not a right or wrong answer, but for you, how does speaking fit into what it is that you want to do and what it is that you want to accomplish?
And I would like to say that remember, every time you start a new revenue stream, an online course, which I know a lot of speakers want to do, a book, even a new topic or a new workshop, it's almost like starting a little business. So just be prepared to give it its due diligence. A lot of people start things and then they just kind of let it go, but you really need to, like a book, when the book is in your hand, that's when the work actually gets started.
Right.
So I want to, you were talking about scaling. So I want to do a plug for both of our books. I've got Scaling Your Speaking Business is my latest book. Hold up your book, Grant.
With the successful speaker, 5 steps for getting paid, booking gigs, getting paid, and building your platform.
That's beautiful. I love it. Hey, and thank you so much. We're getting a ton of feedback here. Appreciate it, Jim Davidson. Appreciate you watching in. Annie Meehan is here. My seeds are growing, so very exciting. Planting for oaks in the future.
Well, and
Big,
let me
strong
piggyback on
oaks.
something there from what you had mentioned as it relates to like Annie's comment about, planting things for the future is I can think of in a couple different ways. One is that event planners that I have spoke with or followed up with for years and just tried to stay top of mind, not being a pain
Mhm.
in the butt, not being annoying, not being
Yep.
a pest or anything. I remember early on in my speaking career, if I'd reach out to an event planner and I didn't get booked, I would be so discouraged and so fret. Why did they book them instead of me? Like, I'm a better
Yeah.
speaker, and that stupid thing. And I realized, like, for most of these events, if they didn't book me this year, they're probably going to be looking for a speaker next year and the
Yeah.
year after and the year
Let's
after.
the
And whoever they
relationship.
had this year, they're probably not going to hire
Yeah.
next year. So there's a decent chance eventually they're going to be stuck with me if I stay on top of it. So
So
just staying top of mind. I remember like one particular event, like the lady booked me after 6 years of following up and just trying to stay top of mind. You didn't book me this, that's fine. I'll talk to you in a
And
few months and I'm going to
so
keep following up
so
with you.
have a good attitude about not getting it is number one,
Totally.
because how you walk away is important.
Very.
But also build the relationship with that person who's making the decision, but also with the speaker who just left.
Yeah.
There
Yeah.
was a comment that I made out on LinkedIn on Ross Bernstein had gone and spoken to a particular group. And I commented, "Hey, Ross, that's an amazing group. I spoke to them, 6 years ago," and not thinking anything of it. And the person who led the group came onto LinkedIn and said, "Hey, Jane, we'd love to have you back."
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing I know, they want to talk 2 days later, which is just a week out from when their event was last year. And now they've booked me actually not even for 2022. I think it's 2023.
Awesome.
So, I mean, you just never know what the relationship. So, my relationship with Ross was actually what got me back into a group that was going to book me. And believe me, this doesn't happen to me very often. I do not go out and book myself to speak at all. This is just one group that has paid me years ago and they want to pay me again. And I'm like, okay, I'll do that. It's a group of speakers and consultants. So it makes
That's
perfect
awesome.
sense. So, okay. Let's talk a little bit. You mentioned something about not hopping on the hot topic bandwagon. But
Yeah.
I do want to plant a seed for people who, if their work can lead to the building of a culture and the keeping of valuable employees, that is a hot topic right now. We have an
Very.
employment, I don't know what we're calling it, an employment glut. We have people looking to attract and retain solid employees all across actually North America, probably all
Right.
around the world, really. And so if you can somehow line up what you do to solving that problem, that's going to be something that is going to pay off for you in the next several years. Now, I'm not saying if you do time management, come on over here. That may not connect the dots. But if you do the DEI space, diversity, inclusion, equity, that is going to make perfect sense for you to help build cultures that people want to come back to again and again. So,
Yeah, I think that like you don't want to just be bouncing from topic to topic to topic, but if there are opportunities that exist that align with what it is that you're doing, and I think it's smart for any speaker to just be aware of what's happening in the world. Meaning, let's say, for example, you
yeah,
are a time management speaker. We could
yes.
say, how do I speak about time management from the perspective of employees who are suddenly working from home and are trying to
Oh,
balance
so
home
good.
responsibilities with being a mom or a dad or
So
a
good.
husband or wife. Like, so how do you take what's happening and still talk about like
Mhm.
your thing, stay in your lane, but again kind of layer it and wrap it in the packaging of like what's happening, because what's top of mind within the workforce. I'll give you
Really
one other
good.
quick story. There was a speaker we were working with, and I think they came from like a legal background, like they were an attorney or something, and they wanted to speak about nutrition and health for attorneys. I was like, that's cool. I don't know how many opportunities exist for something like that, but
Mhm.
let's look at it through the lens of, for someone who's hiring a speaker to speak to attorneys, what are the top of mind challenges that they have when they're going to bed at night? What are the things like, man, if someone could just solve this for me, that'd be a big deal. So we talked about like the big challenges for attorneys are the same for a lot of different industries: stress and burnout and fatigue and
Yeah.
depression. So how do we talk to those issues? And maybe one of the ways that you can help solve those issues is through health and nutrition and
Exactly.
exercise and those sort of things. Is any attorney excited or anyone hiring a speaker to speak to attorneys excited about, hey, come in and tell us what to eat? Like, nobody's excited about that. But if you're like, hey, I can tell you how to reduce the turnover and the
Stress,
stress and the fatigue
burnout.
in your attorneys, awesome, sign me up, right?
So
So think
good.
about, again, what's happening and how do you solve their problem rather than just what it is that you want to speak about.
Yeah, and if you can hit them in the bottom line, like we're going to lower absenteeism, we're
Right.
going to lower healthcare costs for the company, that's going to really be impactful. Sometimes you think you're selling one thing, like your client thought she was selling what to eat, but really you're selling something else, which is
Right.
the outcome of eating the right way. And
Correct.
so I think that's really interesting. So, so many things for us to talk about. Let's talk about what might turn off a person who is potentially going to hire you. I have one right off the top of my head that I would like to share, and that is adding someone to your newsletter list without their permission.
Yeah. Yeah.
It happens to me weekly. I get multiple that I unsubscribe. And I'm not, if I was kind of angry about it, I might say, this is spam. I did not ask for this. So
Right.
you all are getting the nice version of me when I say, I no longer want to receive these emails, but I did not ask for them.
Yeah.
And I would like to send it back and say, I did not ask for this. Why are you adding me to your list? So that's one of my top little picadillos that you might do to a speakers bureau or a meeting planner or decision maker, is just go and add them without permission. What have you
Yeah.
got?
Yeah, a couple that come to mind. One is if we go back to that and that speak framework, that A of acquiring paid speaking gigs and kind of what we're talking about of reaching out to some potential cold leads or warm leads or someone that you're trying to get to book you.
Yes.
One thing that you want to do is to really like take the time to do some due diligence on them, to research them. And when you're sending an email to them, you
Mhm.
don't want it to feel like copy and paste. Like every one of us, we all get a lot of emails and we can tell the difference between one that was written to us specifically
Yes.
versus one that was to us and 1,000 other people, right?
That's
So if you're
so
just
good.
copy and pasting and then just spray and pray model, like that doesn't work. Versus like I really took the time to understand your business and your role and
Yeah.
your audience and your event and your industry, and here's how I think I can help, and based on this, and here's like that's what you want to do. And again, that takes more time, right? But that's where you start to see more results. So that would be one thing. Another
Mhm.
thing would be like when you're following up, and this is so important, is you don't want to send one email and just kind of like, I'm just going to sit back and wait and someday
Yeah.
maybe they'll email me back. You want to follow up, you want to stay top of mind, but you don't want to overdo it. You don't want to be annoying. Whereas if you send an email and then the next day you're like, hey, did you get my email? Next day, did you get my email? Haven't heard from you. Like that just becomes annoying,
How many
right?
do we think is annoying in one kind of period of time?
Yeah.
Where do you draw the line?
Yeah, I usually after I send that first email, I usually wait anywhere from 10 to 14 days. The reason being is anytime we send any email to anybody, we have no idea what's happening on the other end of that.
Yeah, and
Meaning
don't
it
imagine that
could
you do know. You don't know.
totally. It could
Mhm,
be maybe they're just busy. Maybe they got it and it's still in their inbox. They just haven't responded. Maybe
mhm.
they're on vacation. Maybe they legit didn't get the email.
Yeah,
Maybe like life is happening. Like we were talking about earlier. You know, my wife had this surgery a couple days ago. We had to go. We were at the doctor again for a follow up
yeah,
this morning. So maybe just like life is happening, and they're like, I
yeah,
want to get to this email. I just haven't, right? So
yeah.
you have no idea what's happening on the other end. So give them some breathing room and don't become a pest or annoying. But I do think it's really important to follow up. And what you're trying to do is when you send any email, you're not trying to like get them to book you right then. Like that's not the way it works.
Mhm,
What you're trying
yeah,
to do is just get them to reply. So I always try to like ask some type of question that's
yeah.
just a simple question that gives them a reason to respond to me. And that's
What's your
all I'm
favorite
trying to do.
question to ask?
One of my favorites is when will you start reviewing speakers for your next event?
Ah, awesome.
Because I'm just trying to give them like give me
Now,
a date. That's
let
all I'm
me
looking
let
for.
me add on to that idea. When will you be reviewing speakers for XYZ and the name of the event?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
So we had Dan Maddox way back when I used to work with it in the Speakers Bureau in Dallas. We had Dan Maddox of the American Payroll Association talk to us about, phone calls coming into his
Mhm.
organization. And he played us voicemail after voicemail. This was years ago. Really, the internet was happening, but it wasn't as hot as it was. And people were connecting with him and not knowing the name of his event or when it was.
Right.
That information is right out there on Google for you.
Right.
Do your homework, customize it. Hey, I see you had Grant Baldwin last year. He's an
Right.
amazing speaker. I bet that went over well. Like, start with something that says, I've done my due diligence.
Yep.
Because what Dan would do with the voicemails of people calling to say, I'm just calling to see when your next meeting is, no bueno.
Yep.
He would just delete, 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 delete. And
Yep.
so I'm pretty sure that's what happens with the emails. So David Avrin, who's come into the school and helped us with a few things, sharing his process, he says that email number 2 is the one that gets more hit, and people come back and, oh yes, I've been meaning to answer this. And so think about email number 2 being one that just says, hey, I just sent you this. I just wanted to make sure that you received it, et cetera, et cetera. And
Can I piggyback on that?
yeah,
I've actually found like amazing success with the third one,
number 3.
because what we call it the ball in your court email, which is,
Oh,
hey,
I like that.
and what I do is I always reply to the previous email that was sent, right? So there's
Yes.
this thread
Yes.
going, and it's not just a new email every single time. But
Yes.
basically, the email is, hey, I've sent this to you a couple times. I don't want to be a pain. I'll leave the ball in your court. If you'd like to
Beautiful.
talk more, let me know. Because again, it's
Okay.
just saying like, hey, I don't want to be like legit don't want to be
A
annoying.
pain
I
in the
don't want to be a
butt.
pain,
Yeah.
but hey, this is on you. And a lot of times that gets a reply
Yeah.
of, oh yeah, it's been in my inbox. I've been meaning to reply,
I love
or
that.
hey, we're meeting, in a month with our committee or
Yeah.
board. Can you circle back with us then? Those type of things, and it just kind of like puts it
That's
back on
really
them.
good. And
And if
it
they're
really
legit interested, they'll
says,
reply.
I don't want to be a pain in the butt. Like, it
Right.
really, it really shows that. I love ball in your court, email
Mm-hmm.
number 3. That's really good. And so you would leave it at that. I think we probably go out. I'd probably do a little bit tighter than a week or 2 out from the first email. I might go maybe a week, say 7 days, and then maybe another week. And then we probably wouldn't do ball in the court until maybe email number 4 or 5, but everyone is going to do it differently. Everyone is going to advise differently. Everybody's going to have their own way of doing it. Hey, if you guys have any questions, I'm loving our audience today, Grant. If you all have any questions for us, please pop them into the comments and let us know what they are. Let me go back to Elaine's question all the way at the top here. She talked about how to expand in agriculture associations. So, if you were looking at an association, is there anything that you would recommend somebody do? I mean, she's pretty well ensconced in agriculture. I think most people already know your name, Elaine. But anyway, let's see what Grant has to add on top of that.
Yeah. So again, it sounds like, Elaine, that you're already doing a lot in one particular industry, and
Mm,
so there's a good chance that you've already built some relationships in some kind
yes.
of tangential type of industry. So it may be, farming, manufacturing, or in some type of I don't know the agricultural world that well. Something related to animals or produce. So there may be some of these like other industries that you would be connected with or familiar with. The
Like
other
the
thing that
national
tends
dairy farmers, she's
totally.
spoken to them for sure. Yeah.
And the other thing that tends to happen is some of this happens organically, meaning that you're booked in one particular industry over an extended period of time. You've built a good niche there, and then you start to have some things that again pop up in some of these other related industries. That, hey, I saw you speak, or a friend of mine saw you speak and recommended you to come over here, and so you start getting some other opportunities or invites in some related ponds or fields in this case, so to speak, and it starts to just kind of expand a little bit organically. So sometimes it's like, okay, I'm going to go all in on this one particular industry over here, and I'm going to literally try to shift my business that way. And sometimes it is more of a organically, I just start getting more and more invites over there, and I'm
Mhm.
enjoying them, or they're better audiences, or they're higher paying, and you want to do more of that direction.
I want to encourage Elaine and everyone listening to circle back to people who already know, like, and trust you.
Yeah.
When you've got 30 years of clients in your database, when's the last time you reached out and said, hey, I have a new speech? So let's
Mhm.
make sure that you're taking advantage of there's already gold in your database. Let's make sure that we go in there and mine it. A lot of people don't ask for the business very frequently. And
Right.
so let's make sure that that's happening.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
so go ahead.
just to piggyback on that, like most of the times, event planners, depending on the nature of the event, will wait 2, 3, 4 years for some of the audience to turn over to try some new speakers before they'll bring a speaker back. But you got to remember, from an event planner's perspective, that anytime that they are hiring a speaker, they are taking a risk. And so I'm going to put you up on stage. I'm going to hand you a microphone, and I hope this is going to work. Versus, like, if they've worked with you before, they had a good experience, the audience loved you, then it's a lot easier for them to be like, you're a much, much, much lower risk. We've had you before. We've worked with you. You're awesome. You check all the boxes. How do we bring you back, and as soon as possible? So as you build your book of business over time, a bigger and bigger percentage of your business becomes, and should become, repeat business, because again, you've built those relationships over time.
Beautiful. And that goes back to being good, by the way. Robert's asking, do you have any catchy email subject line titles to capture the meeting planner's attention? Excuse me. The name of their event, they cannot delete that. So if you use, Explosion 2022 and the dates or whatever that might be, use the name of their event is what we talk about in the subject line, because they just really, you want them to not delete it. What do you think, Grant?
Yeah, sometimes I'll just use something super vague, like quick question.
Oh, that's
And
good.
versus just something that's just like, I'm just trying to get them to open the email. I'm trying to get
Yeah,
them. And when you write the email, you want to keep it really, really, really short, like
yeah,
just a couple of sentences. Again, you don't need this 90 paragraph email about why you're so amazing, and here's my life story, and here's every place I've ever spoke, and here's why you should hire me. Like, nobody's going to read that. Like, that's going to get deleted. So just a couple sentences that gets them to respond to you, because you're really, like, think about the goal with each email, and especially that first one. You're just trying to start the conversation. I promise you, they're not going to book you from that first email. You're just trying to open the door to start the conversation. What I'm looking for is a reason to call them. I want them to email me back, and then I want a reason to call me. If they show any interest at all, that's where you really need to pick up the phone and call. Meaning, if they ask, tell me more about what you speak about, or what are your prices? Are you available on this date? Have you ever spoken to this type of group? Anything that shows any
that
level of
goes to a
interest,
call.
you want to talk to them. Yep.
Awesome, awesome. Eddie's asking, Grant, how does a speaker build their self-esteem up to be a better speaker?
Yeah, I think some of it is just reps and over time. Like the first time that you speak, I think any speaker goes back to their first presentation and they're going like, "Boy, that was rough. That did not go over so well."
Yeah.
And the way that you get more comfortable is the way that you get more comfortable doing anything. If you want to become a better writer, you write. If you want to become a better speaker, you speak. And so it may be opportunities where you're actually, doing live in person paid gigs, but maybe you have opportunities like in this type of setting where you're doing an interview or a podcast, or you're doing
Mhm.
a YouTube video, and you're just looking for some of those reps. When you're even just in like one-on-one conversations and you're playing with a new story, you're just like trying to tell bits of the story to see like what works, what lands, what doesn't. When you're talking with coworkers or something, you're just trying some of these different things, but you're kind of getting this practice and these reps in to build some of that confidence. And some of that, again, just takes time. That's not going to just magically come from day one.
And let me just add on a little piece to that. We have a saying over here that is clarity equals confidence.
Hmm.
And so when you're really, really clear on the outcome you're delivering, and you have like a three-part formula that allows you to really map it out for people in a simple way, that will give you more confidence. So get really clear on the outcome of your talk. And I think that will be really helpful.
Great.
Lori is asking, how can you be careful not to price yourself out of consideration, especially for nonprofits? Lori, I'm so happy you asked this question. Grant, you go first.
Yeah, so there are a variety of different speaking industries, and the reality is that each of them are going to have kind of different fee levels. So the truth is that you can charge more in speaking to corporations than you could to nonprofits. You can charge more speaking to colleges versus elementary schools, right? It's not that one's better or worse than the other. There's just kind
Mhm.
of like different fee ranges that each industry is going to have. And so recognize that even though like nonprofits may have a lower budget compared to a corporation or association, that doesn't mean that they have no budget. And one of the challenges that you really have to be aware of, especially if you want to be speaking to nonprofits or churches or religious organizations, is because they are a nonprofit or because they have a limited budget, and because oftentimes they are doing something that is cause based and cause related, that oftentimes as speakers, sometimes our hearts can be bigger than our brains, and going like, I just want to help people. I just want to help everyone. Let me just throw this one in. I'm going to do this one pro bono. And the truth is that you are providing something of value, and you have to receive something of value in exchange. Now,
Mhm.
ideally, that comes in the form of a check, and sometimes that can come in other forms. So maybe you get referrals from additional business. Maybe they buy a certain number of copies of your book. Maybe they hire you for some additional consulting or coaching. So there's a lot of ways that you can receive value, but what you can't do is you can't just say, I'm just going to do this for free, or I'm going to do this for nothing just because like they're helping, save the planet or save these people or save the whales or whatever. Like, you still are running a business. Now, at the same time, Lori, the other extreme can happen where you're like, hey, I'm a, $30,000 speaker, and I only speak at these certain nonprofits. And they're just like, and this isn't true for just nonprofits. This is the case with anything. Like, there's going to be an upper limit for just about any industry. And if you're needing to price yourself above that, then you may realize like that may significantly decrease the number of opportunities. Does it mean that nobody in that industry can hire you? Not necessarily, but it will certainly diminish the number of opportunities that you may have. So it's not necessarily like a good or bad thing. Maybe you want to do like, I want to do fewer gigs and I want to do higher paid gigs. And if you have the name and the cachet to pull that off, that's fine. But you just have to be aware of that trade-off.
So I've put up on the screen, we have a worksheet called Where to Find the Money in Speaking. You can go to speakerlauncher.com/where hyphen money. And if I would like to even come at that worksheet that we're providing. We actually give little dollar signs next to all the places where we think, kind of like the dollar signs at the restaurant uh, in the when you see the list of restaurants, it's like $1 is not very
Yeah,
expensive, two and three, and on like that. But here's the thing: from a mindset perspective, all bets are off. The expert charges what the expert charges, and I think that you should assume that everybody can afford you.
sure.
And I know that might sound kind of crazy, but up here in Canada, I have always said, Canadian clients are cheap. They never spend as much money as American clients. But guess what? My buddy Joe Calloway comes from Nashville up to
Yep.
Toronto and commands a $20,000 or $30,000 US fee. Why? Because Joe didn't say to himself, "Oh, don't bother with Canada. Canadians are cheap. You're never going to get paid there." He just said, "This is my fee, $30,000," and they said, "Okay." So never assume that you know what the budget is, and let's not say across the board that one industry has, only this much money. Let's just imagine that we can break through if we want to. Now, maybe that those just aren't your people, and that's okay. You'll steer your efforts in a different direction. But I love the idea of just imagining that everybody can afford you.
Yeah. I
Fun.
want to, I'll give you two other quick thoughts. Is one dangerous thing is, especially if you're trying to book the gig, is it's easy to start negotiating against yourself. Meaning, a lot of times what happens is you'll talk to an event planner, you'll talk to a potential client, they'll ask, what's your fee? And a lot of times we'll be like, oh, my fee is $5,000 or 4,000, and we
If
just
that,
immediately start like,
however. Hmm.
yeah, or like whatever, whatever you got, I can
Hmm.
make it work. Like, we're
Yeah.
just trying to negotiate against ourselves. And so the second thing with that is one of the most difficult things for any speaker to do, because we love speaking, we love helping, we love being on stage, we love being a part of the event. Is the most difficult thing to do is to learn to walk away. Meaning, like, you're going to talk to some events and they're like, they just can't afford you. They don't have the budget. They can't make it work. It doesn't make sense for you to do it. And you have to say no. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. Now, it doesn't mean you're just like, hey, I'm rich and you're broke and you can't afford me. Like, nope, it's not like that. Okay. You still say, listen, I don't know that I'm going to be able to make it work. Tell me more about like this fee
Yeah.
range, kind of what you're looking for. Okay. Let me Tom over here. Tom, I think would be a great fit for you. Here's why. If you're cool, let me make an introduction to Tom. So it's not like you're just leaving them high and dry. Like, let me still help you out, but it doesn't necessarily involve you coming to present.
Yeah, we call that exercising your no muscle. There are some
Mm-hmm.
people on the line here who shall me name remain nameless, who need to work on exercising the no muscle and be okay with saying, I'm afraid that's just not a good fit right now. We're just
Yep.
too far apart and I don't see us making it work. That is okay, because you never know. Sometimes those gigs actually circle back to you, Grant. Now,
Hmm.
tell everybody how people can get in touch with you. We've got your thespeakerlab.com up on the screen. Is there anything else that we should be saying about how they can connect with you?
Yeah, everything that we do is over at thespeakerlab.com. We've got a podcast by the same name that we've got a couple hundred episodes of. Jane's been a guest on multiple times, so make sure that you check that out. While we're on the topic of speaking fees, we do have a free resource people can check out over at myspeakerfee.com. Myspeakerfee.com. It's a free speaking fee calculator. I saw there's a question from Rob about thoughts on virtual versus live speaking fee. The speaking fee calculator actually factors that in. So as you kind of go through it, it's again free tool, free calculator. Answer a couple questions, it'll spit out a number at the bottom.
Cool.
And as Jane knows, like speaking fees are much more of an art than a science, so don't take this as gospel, but it'll get you in the ballpark there, it'll get you something to work with.
I
But
love
definitely check out myspeakerfee.com.
I love that. And hey, if we've missed your question, I'll try to come out to you and catch you on LinkedIn or Facebook or wherever you might be, and make sure that we answer that question. I want to say thank you so much for being with us today, Grant Baldwin. You are always just like so much fun to talk to. We always cover a lot of ground. And thank you. I appreciate you, my friend.
You bet, absolutely. I'm a huge Jane fan, so anything I can do to hang out with you any day, I'm always in for.
And for those of you tuning in, thank you so much. And we'll see you soon, Wealthy Speakers. Bye for now, everyone.